That's what I was talking about. So it's no big, this is not a big deal. I'm just throwing my opinion out like I think I have the right to, and as I said, we can vote on it. I'm not gonna have any hurt feelings. I'm just letting my opinion known.
Understood,
That's about
Councilman.
it.
At this time, Councilman Pat Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's simply, I can't support this. I think this could get out of control. That's all.
Thank you. Council Vice President, go right ahead.
Thank you. We are humans, and there are days that things based on recent history, recent political activities are more sensitive to us. And we as elected officials and leaders need to be careful in the words we choose, not only with one another, but with how we deal with our constituents. And sometimes discretion is the most valorous thing we can do. By not making a statement at the time, maybe standing up, and I've done this before, ask the council president to have somebody clarify something, or ask him to have staff follow up with them. Having staff follow up, I find, is the way to let the person say everything they needed to say on our behalf to our staff. That's why we have our staff, so that they can help people synthesize what they're about to say to us and what the real need is. And our staff really does a good job of reaching out to us and not trying to overstep by solving every problem without us. So let's empower our staff to be more active if necessary, to follow up quicker, to make sure that each speaker who has a question or a need from help has someone before they warm their seats again, touch base with them. And I think that can be a conversation we have internally on our operations with the team. But I'd hate for the wrong day for somebody to say something and then we have to have a moment of back and forth and then it gets longer and longer. I thought one of the reasons that we got into the discussion about having rules around our public comment was that we were spending 3 and 4 hours in public comment. I think that we will go the wrong direction if we enter into a back and forth with people who should just be commenting to us, not entering into a dialogue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilwoman Turner.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on what Vice President was saying, when does the dialogue end? How do we know that the point has been made, or if we can't even come to a resolution, be it the dialogue? What's the cutoff point? That would be my concern.
Okay, thank you.
For the chair, we can talk about it. One question from the council person. We can put guardrails around this. All I'm trying to do is have the opportunity to say one question. I don't think it's going to get out of control. We control that. But if you have a renegade council person who wants to just bull rush the meeting, that's what would be the downside. That's what I'm hearing here. I'm just throwing it out on a rare occasion, and Councilman Miller hit it on the head. If we have just a touch more flexibility as we move forward with the chairman of the committee, if it makes some sense to ask a question, that would be delightful as well. And we could leave this all alone.
Okay, Councilman Strawn, then Councilman Gallagher.
Just as the moving parties just suggested, the opportunity is to ask a question then to the speaker. If I ask a question, therefore, the logical thing is you expect a response from that question. So now that person is now speaking twice. Then that comes back, oh, that opened up another question. How you have now potentially created a dialogue that doesn't have a beginning or an end to it as regards to that. And so it just seems to me we're going down a path that I think is we've got fantastic staff. I don't know that we've ever missed a beat when somebody comes up and says, can you help us? And our staff has jumped on it. And quite frankly, I think they give a better answer than I would on most of the occasions anyway, because they know the research and they know the background.
Councilman Gallagher.
I just think what we have is sufficient, and the reason being is the chair controls. I've been in this chamber now for a number of years, and I've not seen a time when someone's had a question that they didn't get an answer as they were leaving the door. it might have happened. In my committees, I have asked speakers questions as chair. In my committees, I've allowed other council people to ask questions if they were so willing to do. A rare thing to happen, but it has happened, and the power rests with the chair. So I think that's where we're at. I don't think there's any concern regarding the ability of council to ask questions as long as you go through the chair. So I don't want to remove that ability of the chair to control a meeting. And I think we're just fine. I've not seen the occasion where a question necessarily needs to be answered at the podium. I just can't remember it. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but what we're doing now, I think, is sufficient and changes it from public comment, which is the important part, to a public dialogue, which, again, it opens up a lot of doors that I don't think we're looking at.
All right.
Let me just end it, if you don't mind. And the staff is incredible. We all know that. They run the whole, whatever we need, we have it in 2 seconds. And I'm glad we're having this dialogue. And in the past, when there was some blurt out from a council member out of a reaction, it was always, it's a one-way street. We don't have answers back. Because of the dialogue, we'll see how it happens in the future if it gets defeated, and we'll play it by ear.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for your conscientiousness and bringing forward the legislation. But again, this is a piece that I do not support as well. We have public comment. The purity of it is for them to comment, and a component of discussion added to that, I think, is not at this time the appropriate path to go down. So with that, we're going to have our roll call.
How about this, Mr.
First,
President?
Councilman would like to make a final comment.
Thank
You have
you.
the last word.
Because of the healthy dialogue and the understanding that I think we all heard each other, I'll just withdraw it and see where it takes us to make it easy on everybody.
No, Councilman, we have had a healthy dialogue. It requires a vote, and we will have a vote.
Wait a second, Mr. Chairman, does it require a vote if the sponsor's trying to withdraw it, even though there's a first and a second?
We will
Council,
follow the will
Councilman,
of the law department.
Councilman Sweeney. So first of all, you made the motion first, and we have not had a second.
I didn't think
Councilman
so.
Miller did.
I don't think so.
Oh, he did not?
He did not.
Okay, all right. It has failed to be seconded. Then we will move on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to withdraw it because it's going to sit in limbo, so we can just make it disappear, if that's okay with you. Is that allowed to do?
Law department? Give him a moment.
Forgive me for not anticipating that question in advance. With respect to sponsorships, Rule 7E, I don't know if this would be considered the sponsor of a motion. At any point prior to final passage, any sponsor may withdraw his or her name as a sponsor by notifying the clerk. That's one. There are 37 pages of rules. I am scanning as fast as I can to determine if there is an applicable rule that relates to withdrawal of a parliamentary motion. Okay. I am now reading from Rule 9, which deals with parliamentary motions. Okay. 9, I'm in 9, I see D. Okay. Subsidiary motions. Haha, Mr. King. Thank you, Mr. King. I was in the Right church, wrong pew, but Mr. King has directed me to that. So an incidental motion, it is in Rule 9. Rule 9E4C, an incidental motion may take priority over a privileged or subsidiary motion depending upon how the motion. So there is in your rules, there is the opportunity to withdraw a motion, and it is an incidental motion which takes precedence before business can proceed. And so there can be an incidental motion to withdraw a motion would
All
be
right,
my
excellent.
determination.
We had a motion without a second, so the
Correct.
sponsor has the right to withdraw his legislation.
That would
his
be my
resolution,
conclusion. Yes.
And that is
I
your
appreciate
call.
that. I just wanted to make it easy on everybody.
So it's now been withdrawn. We will move on.
Mr. President? I would like to move amendment number 3 in your packet. And this amendment simply provides that the provision that limits the number of speakers will sunset as of December 31st, 2025. And I would just point out that we've operated for 13 years without having to place limits on the number of speakers. And as Will Tarter pointed out, it's not generally done in other jurisdictions. But we do have a special situation here that we have to deal with. But there's no assurance that this is going to be a permanent kind of situation. And so I think at the end of next year, we should just ensure that we take another look at this. And if the conditions remain the same and we need to make it permanent, we can easily do so. But this would just assure that we would take another look at it at that time. And I would ask if one of my colleagues would second my motion.
Second.
So that's it. Thank you.
Discussion. Councilman Schron.
Yes, and I don't know that this is a reflection of Mr. Tarter's, what he presented to us today, but it was just recited a few minutes ago, but I was under the impression when Mr. Tarter called me that there was a time limit on one of these 3 counties by doing that, by having a number of minutes and time that they were allowed to speak, by limiting the number of speakers out there. So you get to the same point as to how it was, and that there had been a time limit on one of these 3 counties. So whether you limit it based on number of speakers, you limit it on the amount of time, you get to the same place as far as that. If we put an hour on it, we would get to the same. We would have got to the same 20 speakers. So I just want to comment. I assume others have spoken with Mr. Tarter on this, and I thought he gave me, when he did his research, that there was a limit that ended up being the same as ours indirectly.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would, to my colleague, I agree with that and would point out that NOACA at their meetings limits it to an hour. So it's out there, but I'm just suggesting we should take another look at it down the road and see where we are. Thank you.
I actually think that conceptually reviewing how we listen to public comment should be something we review each year for the next year. At the beginning of the year, we take a look and see how people have been talking to us, whether there are any changes we need to make, backwards or forwards. Public comment is part of American free speech, and we should always be committed to support it, especially from our constituents, the ones who take the time to vote for us. That vote is so special and so important that taking a look annually at how we want to make sure that they have access to their elected officials is pretty important. So that would be my thought on this since we're discussing it all. Free speech is important. Making sure that we always protect that speech is something that we should be willing to do once a year, not, ad hoc. We maybe make it part of our business calendar. Those are just thoughts in reading this for the first time yesterday.
Okay. Just a thought. None of the legislation that has been put forward or any of the substitutes impacts the daily public comment that we experience on a regular basis. 20, to limit to 20, it doesn't impact what happens today or in most of our committee meetings or in the regular council meetings. The legislation that's been brought forward impacts those unique moments that come forward and is there for when those unique moments come. The idea of a review is not a bad idea. It doesn't necessarily mean we'd have to sunset this. This puts us in a position because these moments do come over the years. Over 14 years, this is not the first time we've had this type of moment, and it will not be the last. But we have something in place when those moments come, as opposed to creating something at each moment. So just a thought. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, Mr. President, and it's, my colleague, as far as the review, I would agree that conceptually, there's nothing wrong with a review process, but the alternative that is to say, we have something in place, we're going to pass, I hope we're going to pass this, and if a body wants to review that, then review it, but if it's not reviewed, then it should stand as we are passing it right now. So that's a different out there. It doesn't sunset, it just continues, but for the fact that we would come back and change that at that time. And so it's not the same as a sunset, which means that you have to go back and have this whole dialogue all over again. It means we've already made the decision, and unless we want to basically change that decision, then I think it stands, and the review process is merely to say, is it time to review? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, then we already have a policy, it's in place, and it's working, and it's effective, is what I would suggest we continue with down that path out there. And so it's kind of a hybrid between the two.
Mr. President?
Councilman Miller.
We all know that we get pulled in 1,000 different directions down here, and if we don't have something put in place to assure that we review this in the future, it's just easy to get lost in the press of other business, and so I think the sunset provision is very useful, and if we decide at the time that what we have doesn't need to be changed, it can be very easily corrected and extended or made permanent. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? All right. So at this time, we will do a roll call as well.
Ms. Conwell? Ms. Conwell is absent. Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
I'm still undecided. How do I vote for that? Abstain? Okay, so I'm going to say no.
Ms. Simon is absent. Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schran? Council President Jones?
Let's pause for one moment. Council, and acknowledge that Councilwoman Yvonne Conwell has joined. And Councilwoman, we are in the midst of a roll call vote regarding a piece of legislation, a proposed substitute by Councilman Miller regarding sunsetting the public comment policies that we are creating. Okay. He, to fairly describe it, he would like to see the legislation that we will be entertaining be sunsetted at a time, year 2025.
So, Mr. President, to Ms. Conwell, the proposal would simply sunset at the end of 2025 the limit on the number of speakers, on the theory that we've operated without a limit for 13 years, and we don't know what things are going to be like a year from now. And maybe we'll need it for the long haul, and maybe we won't. So we'll just take another look at it at that time.
All right, I had read the amendment, but thank you. I vote yes.
Council President Jones?
Yes.
The motion carries with 7 voting in the affirmative and 3 casting dissenting votes.
Thanks very much, colleagues.
All right. Are there any other comments, questions? If not,
Fourth Amendment?
my intention, there is a need by our law department to review all of the approved changes, proposed substitute changes.
Through the chair.
And they will,
Council President, we have a fourth one by Councilmember Turner.
all right, I asked.
Yeah, I was gonna stop you. I'll make this quick because we've had a robust dialogue already, so I won't belabor the moment. I am simply requesting 30 speakers at 2 minutes. It gives 10 more people an opportunity to express themselves. I definitely believe in the First Amendment and giving folks an opportunity to express their First Amendment rights. I utilize it often myself, and I definitely adhere to any rules and policies, procedures in place as I try to communicate my thoughts to my federal, state, and local elected officials. And since we are going to put some constraints in place, I'm just simply asking to extend the depth of speakers to 30 at 2 minutes apiece. Thank you.
I actually have one question. Does this change all public comment? So now we are at 2 minutes for everyone? Is that the outcome of this legislation? Or even the intention of this legislation?
That would be my intent, yes.
Change everyone to 2 minutes. So like today, they would get 2 minutes. You know, this is not a unique moment. This is just normal day-to-day activity. So now those who spoke for 3 minutes today would only speak for 2 minutes.
Yes, I think that's enough time to express their thoughts concisely and succinctly, and it would open up an opportunity for 10 other individuals to do the same.
Any other comments, questions?
I would just say, Mr. Chair, I think I initially was for more speakers to speak. I was probably the 2-hour person, but I don't want to, if we could, I don't know, put a slash amendment where it's not impacting committees, you know, where they can still have their 3 minutes. I don't know how we would work that out. So I guess
Councilmember, if you could speak a little louder, please.
for amendment,
Thank you.
I'm okay with increasing the number of individuals that would public comment and keeping it 2 minutes for council nights, but for committees, keeping it for 3.
Mr. President.
It's all sunsetted until 2025. Right?
If
Say 2025.
If Ms. Conwell's concern is during her committee meetings that 2 minutes isn't enough, as a committee chair, she can allow the person to continue, right?
So you're talking a daily changing of the policy?
I understand,
from 2 to 3.
She's worried that, you know, at the committee meeting, and I believe the chair can give the person more time if it's necessary.
Can.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Councilman Miller.
So, in a couple minutes, we're going to get to the technical amendment that the law department came up with. And a portion of it reads, that after the speaker is recognized by the chairperson, the presenter shall state his or her name and may speak for not more than 3 minutes or other reasonable time limit established by the chairperson. So this gives the chairperson the power to set the time limit based on circumstances. And if Councilwoman Turner's amendment passes, would be harmonized and changed to 2 minutes. But if there's a committee meeting and 3 people come in to speak on public comment, the chairperson under this provision will easily be able to say, seeing what we have, it can be 3 minutes. And so I think this kind of gives us the best of both worlds. One of my concerns was that in the lottery system, the people who might be speaking about the remote work policy or the trees or one of the other topics that's not the thing that 50 people are speaking about, that some of these people might get excluded. And if we, and the law department was telling us, well, you have to be really careful when you start getting into looking at what people are going to speak about. And so this provides another way to get at that. If 50 people sign in and you draw 30 instead of 20, it's more likely that every topic that someone wanted to talk about is going to be heard. And so I think it helps with that situation. So I'm a yes on this amendment. Thank you.
Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second this to get it for the discussion purposes. And 2 minutes is kind of tight, but I don't mind the concept of getting more people. And I like it, if somebody comes up and there's only 3 people here, they make a request to the chair saying, I'd like to be granted 3 minutes. And it's granted before they begin their comments, not having to rush, or we can offer to them. So it's just a semantic thing now. So giving the people as much opportunity to talk, but 2 minutes is tight. Introducing themselves, that's 12 seconds. Gaining their thoughts, getting their phone. So I like the 3. I mean, when there's only 3 people there, I like to listen to the folks that are here that came down and expressed their thoughts. So that's my 2 cents, and hopefully my second was in order.
Any further comments or questions?
Through the chair, just wanted to ask Councilwoman Turner, when you thought of the 2 minutes, but you also increased the number, were you thinking that it would be, was it your mindset that you were thinking it would be the same amount of time? It would all fall out where we're all, it will still equal the same amount of time for the public comment section?
I won't take full credit for that, but I was hoping that it would. No, this is touchy. We've all been here for the past few months watching this go down. I don't know if there's a perfect solution, but this one is a little more expansive, I think, than some of the other proposals. And ultimately, we want people to be able to express themselves. My rationale was that let's give more people an opportunity to speak with us. They still have opportunities to call us, to email us, to meet with us. I know that I have taken quite a few meetings from both sides of the communities around the issue that we've been addressing for the past few months. So there are other opportunities for them to speak with us. But in terms of public comment, I was just really hoping to increase the number of people being able to express themselves.
Would it be amendable if we Still kept it at 3 minutes with the increased number?
No, I would not.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments, questions? If not, we're ready for the roll call.
Ms. Conwell?
It's been that way the whole time. I'm glad you're here now because I'm second.
I just, discussion, I like the part that we're increasing numbers, but not the part that we're shortening 2 minutes. But I'll say yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon is absent. Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, with the caveat that the chair be open-minded for the 3 minutes request.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schran? Councilman President Jones?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion carries with 10 voting in the affirmative.
Okay, so now we have a Fifth Amendment is more technical, it's from the Law Department.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, Michael King. I'll keep this brief. This is actually an amendment prepared by council staff in consultation with the Law Department in response to some dialogue around harmonizing and consolidating some of the rules and procedures between council and committee meetings primarily. As Councilman Miller pointed out, some of the language was changed to provide a little bit more flexibility to the chairperson to establish a different time limit. So I think that would, as Councilman Turner's amendment provide a little bit more flexibility to the chair too, as Councilman Miller said, establish a different time limit depending on the circumstances, as long as that discretion is used in a content neutral manner. In other ways, you know, it harmonizes and clarifies some ambiguities around signups, and it establishes basically the same set of rules and procedures for both council and committee meetings. So the existing rule has a paragraph talking about committee meetings, public comment at committee meetings, and a separate paragraph, public comment on council meetings. And there are like minor differences between those, which have caused, as we've trying to figure out the guidelines for signups and everything, little hiccups here and there. And so this is basically just harmonizing them, saying these are the public comment rules that are going to apply to both council and committee meetings, and I think hopefully clarify for readers how those processes are supposed to work. So if there are any questions, I'm obviously able to speak to any specifics, but in general, these are mainly technical in nature.
So Mike, after we look to address this fifth proposed amendment, substitute amendment, does the Law Department still need time to look in the coming weeks at this further?
I think, you know, out of due deference to the Law Department and to make sure that we properly harmonize all of the amendments that have been voted on today, I think we as staff would probably request that this, assuming the committee is ready to move forward with this legislation, it be referred out tonight for second reading on tonight's agenda, and then we can combine all of these amendments into a final proposed substitute that can be presented and considered before final passage at the next council
And
meeting.
the Law Department can look at that as, okay, all right. Councilman Schran.
On this, Mr. King, when we got committees that are hybrid, we'll call it that just for purposes of ease of, where they're both chaired and vice chaired, one by the council and one by the executive branch, how do these rules fall out? And we'll ask the law director, is there an interpretation of that? Because I sit on one of those committees and we have had some controversy as to how do these communicate, how does this take place, these public comment?
To the councilman through the chair, I just a point of clarification, I'm assuming you're referring to like the investment advisory committee.
Yep, like the investment advisory
Yeah,
committee.
okay. I just want to clarify.
We have people
Yeah.
coming to speak at that.
Yeah, so for the purposes of the definitions of the council rules, these rules only apply on their face to the council and the committees of council. So the investment advisory committee is not considered a committee of council, it's actually a statutory body established under the Ohio Revised Code. My understanding is that in the past few months, the investment advisory committee has adopted basically mirror images of these of these procedures for its own purposes, but that committee is ultimately responsible for adopting its own rules governing public comment.
Are there other committees that you foresee or that you see that are operating in a similar manner in which council members sit on it and would be maybe anticipating that these rules would be applying when in fact they might not be?
To my knowledge, I can't think of any off the top of my head. We do have one subcommittee ongoing that these rules would theoretically govern, and so we'd want to make sure that they're aware of the change in the rules. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Economic Development Committee, Commission?
The Economic Development Commission, again, it's a public body that's governed by our charter and the open meetings laws. But again, as these rules only apply to council, right, the legislative body, I don't think they would govern specifically the Economic Development Commission. But of course, the commission could adopt these or similar rules for its own governance.
The Investment Advisory Committee, though, our point of law is coming from that chair over there. Would that be correct? Because it does support, the law director would be supporting both sides on that?
I believe the law director would be advising the committee. I would defer to him on that question. But
As Mr. King is, through the president, to the councilman, yes, Mr. King is correct that the Investment Advisory Committee is a statutory committee. It was not a committee created by council. It's not a committee of council, and so Mr. King is correct that that this particular rule would not apply to things like the Investment Advisory Committee. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any others like that either. There used to be, I guess, the Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, but that has become now, I believe, a committee of council. That's the only thing I can think of that's close to the Investment Advisory Committee along those lines. But this would apply only to committees of council. And as far as my representation, by charter, I represent council, and I represent the county executive. Those are my charter duties, if that was the question.
Well, through the chair to the law director, then we still, if I've been assigned to that committee, it would be great if we could figure out who do we go to for support on this, because we have the same issues, exact same issues that we're talking about here. And if you're telling me you're not our advisor, then we have to go to somebody else outside of your office to get.
I'm not necessarily saying that I'm not. I haven't been asked that question. I would need to look into that because it's as you pointed out, it's a hybrid situation where we have a statutory body that used to consist of 2 board of county commissioner members and a county treasurer. And once the voters approved the charter, we have kind of tried to figure out what to do with that, and have made it now a 3-member body consisting of the county executive, a member of council, and the treasurer. So it's not clear, and I have not been asked that question, but I'm happy to look into it and get back to you.
Not to me, to
whomever asks. Yeah.
Well, I'm asking only because I sit on that and would love to make sure that we're in compliance, so we aren't drafting these public communication comments through multiple different channels. If it would be nice if we could have an agreement on all those kind of things, so there's a consistent path.
All right.
Mr. President.
Anything else, Councilman?
I believe that council staff working with the law department came up with some very good language that creates a simpler version of the same process for council and committee with the flexibility for the chairman to set the public speaking time limit based on circumstances. And so I would like to make a motion that we accept the staff and law department technical amendment with the understanding that staff will then harmonize it with the 3 amendments that were passed earlier today. And so I'll make that motion and ask for a second.
Second.
Properly moved by Councilman Miller and seconded by Councilman Jack Schron. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. All right. At this time, we're going to have a presentation from our own Council Vice President, Cheryl Stevens.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just a point of order. I don't know if the committee wanted to refer the item out of committee to council for second reading. If not, that is
Was
entirely
that said?
fine.
It
But
should have been second reading. Did you say second reading? If not,
I only moved to accept the substitute, so it's now
Thank you.
part of of
Thank
what's before us, and so it would be a
Yes.
separate question as
thank
to
you,
whether we
Councilman
want
Miller.
to
Thank
refer
you,
it out.
Council. Yes. So it's been properly moved and seconded. We have our proposed substitute. I will make a motion that we move this resolution 2024-0266 to the full council for second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. All right, and this time we'll have Council Vice President introduce our speaker for our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my dear colleagues, a labor of love has taken place for over 4 years now. At a time when I first joined the council, we were introducing legislation to provide our tax revenues to be collected by different lenders. And we looked at two forms of collections, overnight investments, long-term investments, and how the funds we receive on behalf of our constituents were collected. As a form of government, we probably in this area collect the largest amount of taxes on behalf of the people who live in our jurisdiction and that we serve. It's significant in that those taxes on real estate alone add up to over $3 billion. Those taxes are used to issue bonds, they're used to help with social services, but most importantly with the $3 billion in real estate taxes, they are used to take care of something as significant as our educational system throughout the county. That is the largest use of real estate taxes. Then the libraries and municipalities also receive significant pieces of our real estate tax collections. When they go up and down, the municipalities, the libraries, and the school systems have less and more. It's so significant that as I began to think about what I contribute to this organization, what I contribute, I believe, is a focus on the business analysis and the finances of what we do to make sure that our constituents have decent and better lives if we impact them in the right way. And so there were a group of residents and activists who came to the former county executive and told him they wanted to see at least 13 issues that banks needed to address as they began to do business with us. And so in listening to them, I think it was in 2019 that I had the first conversation with some of the activists. I thought that council had a role in this, to listen to our constituents and see if there was a way to impact in a positive way the collection of taxes. And why was this so important, especially on real estate? Because it is at least the largest amount of money we collect. Sales tax is significant, but real estate taxes are even more significant. And a lender in this marketplace of substance should work with our constituents to acquire, rehab, reinvest in property in such a way that the asset which we earn money off of continues to increase in value rather than decrease in value, because it's harder and harder for our constituents to find funds to acquire a home, acquire a business or commercial venture, to reinvest in it, rehab it, and or improve it with additions to the property. And so as I began that dialogue with myself, first I had to talk to Dan Brady, the first council president that I had the honor to serve with, and his vice president, who later became president. And both of those gentlemen were kind enough to agree to let me to volunteer to do more work. And so in that volunteering to do more work, I had the pleasure of working with a large group of people who said yes, in some cases voluntold to join me in this experiment to find out whether banks that said they were vested in our community and wanted to do business when their contracts could be in excess of $6 or $7 million of revenue for their organizations, or whether they were really lending to our constituents, whether they were providing them with opportunities to create new businesses, to expand and rehab, whether it was residential or commercial. And this was a great journey that we did. The committee and council supported, and I want to thank staff, especially Joe Nani and Cynthia Mason, for sticking with me this whole trip. And of course, we dragged Trevor into anything that has numbers to do with it. So he got voluntold and had additional duties as well. And then I didn't want anybody else on staff to feel they were left out. So somebody asked everybody else to do something else to make sure that we looked at this with a focus to how we benefit people who live and own property in Cuyahoga County, whether they were registered voters or not. If they did business in this county and their property values increased and gave us more tax dollars to spend on our people, that was a good investment for my team and our future as a county. And so what you are about to hear is the story of our journey. And the story of our journey tells some pretty specific things. The administration is introducing legislation to begin the next commitment to lenders to handle our real estate taxes. And as we make that decision to enter into contracts with parties, I would like for you to not only think about what those lenders do as their business operations piece, because we know that how you do business and how efficient you are helps us make a decision, but how you're concerned about our asset, which we're trusting you to manage our revenues for, is important too. On my committee, I had a series of people who have different perspectives about that. The activists like Barbara Anderson, the mayor like Annette Blackwell, the people who've been elected officials like Matt Zone, the people who are married to elected officials like Gary Benjamin. The reality is it was a very diverse team, and it was people who are concerned about the same thing the 11 members of this body are, a positive future for Cuyahoga County. Without further ado, I believe Frank is first up to talk to us.
There's a right below the.
Thank you. Council President Jones, Vice President Stevens, and members of council, thanks for the opportunity to speak. You're going to hear a two-part story, all related to what Councilwoman Stevens just relayed to you. Half of that story is the work and the findings of that subcommittee, which Barbara Anderson and Sally Martin O'Toole will give you. The other half is research on bank lending, which I've been providing for the council over the last couple years. And let's see. Can you put up this slide? There we go. I'm just going to skip the first one since it's obvious. There are 4 topics I'm going to briefly touch on. Oh, and by the way, there's only 10 slides here. It's going to be pretty quick. This is part of a 130-page report, which you will be getting in about a week. It's just being wrapped up, so we picked about 10 slides just to give you a feel for this. 4 housing trends that I think are worth considering that are the backdrop for all of this. One is, even though home sale prices are rising significantly around the county, there actually are parts of the county where there's a different story. The east side of Cleveland, the median home sale price in December of 23, just 7 months ago, was $55,000. That's $25,000 less than the median sale price on the east side in 2005. So homeowners have still not recovered lost equity. On the other hand, though, that's an opportunity for affordable housing. But so depressed housing prices is one. Second is those depressed housing prices have been attracting out-of-state investors. Third is a lack of access to mortgage credit for home repair and home purchase. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. And then fourth is decline in homeownership in the county. Just looking at the investor activity for just a minute, you can see that the east side of Cleveland is the top blue line. In 2020, 2020, nearly half of all properties, 1 to 3 family homes, were bought by an investor or some type of business. And look at, you can see where it started back in 2004, it was only about 15%. Almost every part of the county has had this dramatic increase in investor activity. The outer suburbs, west inner suburbs slightly, but certainly the east inner suburbs and the east side of Cleveland, and the west side in particular. Going to the next one. So regarding these low prices, there are many homes in the housing market for under $100,000. These could and should be opportunities for affordable homeownership, but, and this is a quote from Councilman Mike Polensek in Cleveland. He went to a KeyBank loan office in 2022 to seek a loan to buy the home next door to his. And he was told, we don't make loans under $100,000. I think a lot of us have suspected this. It was the first time that somebody actually was able to document this. I'm going to go on. So this lack of access to home mortgages 100,000 and below, combined with competition from investors coming in and paying cash, undermines affordable home ownership opportunities. And you can see that here. Over 20 years, I think if nothing else gets your attention, this really should. Over 20 years, the loss of home ownership in Cuyahoga County is really dramatic, except for the outer suburbs, a slight increase in the outer suburbs. The greatest decrease is in the majority black east inner suburbs, the majority black east side of Cleveland. Just turning to just a few slides related to the 4 banks that are under consideration for a contract with the county for banking services. This has been a major focus of the research that I've done. So this is looking at home purchase loans by these 4 lenders. They're in red font, to low and moderate income borrowers in 2022. Now, if they weren't number 1 or 2, then I've also included who was number 1 and 2. So Cross Country was number 1, Third Federal number 2. But Huntington, amongst the 4 banks being considered, did have the largest number of loans to low and moderate income borrowers, the largest market share amongst those 4. PNC, KeyBank, and US Bank were about a third of that or a quarter of that. This is the same information, but looking at a 7-year view. What happened with that same data over 7 years? And you can see that Huntington has maintained approximately a 6% market share throughout the 7-year period. The other 3 banks who are in the running for a contract with the county, actually a slight increase in some cases, slight decrease in others, but generally their market share has been about a third or not much more than a half or a third, in some cases a quarter. Last, oh, I guess I didn't go forward. I'm sorry. This is the last thing. Loans for 100,000 or less, which we talked about earlier. Cross Country is the leader, making these loans with an 8.5% market share. Amongst the 4 banks being considered for the county banking services contracts, Huntington, again, has the largest market share at 7.2%, PNC at 2.2%, KeyBank at 1.6%, and US Bank at 1.4%. The last thing here, well, it's next to the last, is looking again at a 7-year period. And you can see that Huntington, again, has maintained the largest market share amongst the 4 banks of meeting this need for loans, which is generally going to be, again, in some of the east inner suburbs and the east side of Cleveland, some of the underserved communities. And then the other 3 banks have stayed pretty much the same. Their market share is about a quarter, a third to a quarter. There's only one more thing I'll show you, and then I'll stop. And this is not looking just at loans, but looking at what are the deposits these banks are holding. So this is data reported to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. This is the official data every bank has to report to the FDIC. Now, the deposits are in the middle, and you'll see the 3 zeros in parentheses. That means this isn't, KeyBank isn't 50 million, that's 50 billion. Their share of the deposits in the county is 49%, almost half. The dollars they've loaned back in the county is about 236 million, I guess that would be. I hope I'm reading that right. And it's only about 0.5% of the money they're holding, that resource, are they loaning back into the county. PNC is loaning back 1.77%. Huntington, again, is leading amongst the 4 banks that are being considered, reloaning 4.2%. U.S. Bank is 2.8%. The average of all 27 depository banks in the county is 2.4%. So we have U.S. Bank exceeding that slightly and Huntington Bank exceeding it significantly. I'm going to stop there and thank you for the opportunity. I'll take any questions if you have any. And keep in mind, you are going to get 130 pages in about a week with the same kind of, a lot more than this. And I'll be happy to come back, talk to you about it, or you can call me one-on-one.
All right, any questions? Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Ford, nice seeing you again. Why 4? Why not just go with one that's the best, or do we divvy it up just because we're nice to all the vendors, or should we dilute it more? Can you give me your thoughts on that?
That is a good question. Well, first let me say that the history of these kind of agreements where a government goes to a bank or banks and says, we've been depositing our money with you for years. We'd like something back. We'd like to make sure you're reinvesting in our community. The first city in the country that ever did that was City of Cleveland under Mike White in 1991. Councilman, were you on council back then?
Might have been an elected official serving at that time.
Yes, but that was groundbreaking. The first county that I know of to do it was this county 4 years ago in 2000 when you approached KeyBank. You'd already been working with KeyBank, but you said, KeyBank, we've been giving you our money. We want to see what is coming back to us in the way of commitment. So at that time, the decision was 1. My personal opinion is I don't think it hurts to do 4. I think the bigger question is how are you evaluating who those 4 are, who warrants the privilege of having your money? Yeah.
And through the chair, I sat on the advisory committee for the city of Cleveland, and they freak out when they see this score. And then all of a sudden they want to do much better.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? How often does this report get done, and what is the uptick, if there is any, for the next year if they come down in the 4th of the 4?
Yeah, this is only the second year that I've been doing this I've been doing this under contract with county council. This is my second report. I'm reluctant to say there have been things that have been disappointing with KeyBank. There are some things you'll see in the research that they did improve some things, but there have been some disappointments. And I know that I will not speak for all the committee, but I know that's the subcommittee rather. I think some of them had concerns over the last 4 years I think they wanted to see more from KeyBank.
And through the chair, my last question is, have they seen this report? And if they have they responded to you and explanation and how much better they're going to get through the chair?
Through the chair to the councilman. So no one has seen the 130-page report that you're going to see first in about a week. But KeyBank has seen periodic reports similar to this all through the last 2 years. The one thing that I recall them saying that stands out in my mind is they said, well, yeah, all those deposits you show, they had some odd explanation for that. And my counter to them was, well, this is what you reported to the FDIC. I didn't make this up. You reported that you had 50% of all the deposits are in your bank. Otherwise, they certainly talked about how they were going to improve their home repair lending. They were going to partner with the Home Repair Resource Center in Cleveland Heights. And everybody had high expectations for that. In the last 6 months, that apparently has now fallen apart, and Home Repair Resource Center is looking at other banks. So there's some disappointments.
Thank you, and you're a good investment with our county tax dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions, comments?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody today. I'm Sally Martin O'Toole. Barbara Anderson and I are going to close us out here. First off, I just want to applaud Vice President Stevens for elevating this work. So Barbara established the Greater Cleveland Reinvestment Coalition many years ago to address these concerns that we as activists in the community were seeing affecting our neighborhoods. Banks not lending, the absolute disparate access to credit that was taking a massive toll on parts of our community. And the argument to be made isn't just equity, but it's financial. So when communities are disinvested and banks aren't lending, and I think you can see that when you drive through the east side of Cleveland, it affects all of us. It affects the tax base. So this work was critical in raising the stature of what banks are doing, the research that Frank was doing, and thank you for allowing that. And what we want to continue to do is this work and having the county lead it, because it also gives cover to smaller units of government that also want to do this but need all of us to do it together. And so some of the recommendations that we have for you are that with the 24 to 28 banking services contract, the county council continue to provide through a reinvestment subcommittee a transparent process for reviewing and monitoring lending performance of partner banks as well as other lenders active in Cuyahoga County, and specifically including performance objectives for lending performance that are quantifiable and measurable to address variations in loan output that may result from year-to-year housing market changes. So as interest rates have increased, the number of loans has gone down. So the way we need to look at it is more of a market share approach. And we have outlined that in the information that we've sent to you, and we urge you to look it over. We need binding obligations of the lenders that we do business with, not just lip service or saying they will do something and not be held accountable for doing it, because we saw that in the last contract. The banks weren't necessarily following through with what they had promised. So we need accountability measures for not meeting the performance objectives. We also recommend that you continue to conduct annual research on lending activity in Cuyahoga County, not just with partner banks, but on all lenders that are active in the county, and continue to make that research publicly available to county residents. It's very powerful. And the way Frank does it is different from the way it's presented elsewhere, in that he's looking at neighborhood geographies, so specific neighborhoods in Cleveland and not just the county as a whole, which would make the bank's performance look better. But we know that, in effect, they're not lending in areas of our community. So I'm going to pass the torch here to Barbara Anderson.
Thank you so much, and greetings to each and every one of you. And I, too, say thank you very much for being here and listening and paying attention to what's going on in our community. Thank you again to Vice President Cheryl Stevens for making us, on overtime sometimes, do more and more, as she insisted upon us digging deeper and looking more diligently at some of the numbers that we were getting. The Community Reinvestment Advisory Subcommittee recommends that the annual lending research that Director O'Toole has just mentioned be used to develop a lending scorecard that would be published annually on lending performance of lenders that are active in Cuyahoga County. That's one way for us to know with a surety what is going on, and it's another way to make sure that they're being held accountable for what they say they are doing. We also ask and recommend that the county utilize us to engage other financial institutions to explore their approaches to lending in Cuyahoga County. So let's not just focus on 2, 3, 5 banks, but let's look at everyone. Let's make sure that our community is being treated in a way that is respectful of lending practices, and again, that they are being held accountable. In light of the fact that the current CRA chair Cheryl Stevens may not be running for reelection, and I'm going to use to say may not be running. The CRAs recommend council identify a council member who can work with the future chair and members to ensure that we continue the important work that we are now doing. It's so important when we look at lending institutions and we look at banks and we understand that when they do not invest into our communities, that they really are holding back our communities, that they are doing damage to the communities, that they are keeping the community from moving forward. This is a detriment to all of us. It's not just to one specific neighborhood or one specific area, but it affects everyone in the community. And because of the investment of our tax dollars that we are paying, we should be receiving more. And when we see we're not, and we certainly have been able to identify that we have not, then we must step forward and speak out. We must be strong about making sure that those, and I'll call them bigwigs, understand that they're not doing their job and we're not going to tolerate it. We look for that kind of support from council, from county council. The neighborhoods, the communities that you serve are looking for that kind of support. So we are urging you to continue taking a leadership role in amplifying public concerns about community credit access by continuing to work with the Community Reinvestment Advisory Committee. We don't look at this as a temporary assignment, but we looked at it as an ongoing assignment with us and you working together to improve our community. We respectfully know that that is what you know is your mission, that it's your assignment, and we join you in that assignment. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Councilman Miller, and then Councilwoman Conwell.
So, Mr. President and colleagues, I would like to commend our Vice President, Cheryl Stevens, and all the community partners for your leadership on this very important issue. We're digging out of a very long history of disinvestment, and we've probably made some progress, but I think we still have a long way to go. And I would like to address one question to whoever feels that they could answer it, just to explain a little bit more about the item that was in the committee report that said that one of the most highly valued commitments, KeyBank's promised to work with the Home Repair Resource Center to expand the successful Challenge Home Repair Loan Fund, never became fully operational and has been abandoned. So I'd appreciate if someone could say a little bit more about why that was so important and what we were hoping to accomplish and why we were not able to bring it to fruition.
Through the president to the councilman, many years ago, one of the things we wanted to elevate the work of was the Challenge Loan Program of the Home Repair Resource Center, which serves the residents of Cleveland Heights. Essentially, Cleveland Heights residents who are not bankable could access these funds for home repair, up to $10,000. And the reason it was successful and it had a infinitesimal default rate was because of the hand-holding done by the agency. So the Home Repair Resource Center would work with borrowers if there was a problem, and they would work through getting them back on track with those payments. It was a wonderful model. KeyBank had expressed interest in expanding that. But what actually took place is that the product that hit the streets was not anything like the Challenge Loan Program. It was a watered-down version that was basically set up to fail, and it did fail. And my understanding is that it's being discontinued. And that's very unfortunate, given that that was the top request of this group, that program was elevated to a countywide status, and that did not occur. And there's really no sticks attached to their default of that.
So thank you very much for that report, and it just highlights the need for further vigilance and advocacy going forward. Thank you.
Councilwoman Conwell.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, not really a question, I wanted to say to the chair and my colleagues, I also would like to commend Vice President Stevens as well as the subcommittee for your work, time, and effort on this. We're part-time and we just can't. We know the issues, we hear the problems, we just don't have some of the time to dedicate. So this was really a great subcommittee that came out of it. I think we did something like this years ago with transportation, which was a issue at the time. But the communities that suffer, my district is one of the communities that suffers from lending practices from some of the banking institutions that you mentioned. Not only are they not lending to smaller mortgage packages, but also are pulling their banks out of the communities, which is another issue and a problem. And so I look at this as a health issue as I meet with developers and other individuals in terms of when we're talking about getting people back to work, whether they're currently homeless or just coming back into the community, or re-entering into society, you know, and people want our public dollars. That's always my conversation with them. It's probably why they don't want to meet with me. But anyway, it's always my conversation about housing. If they want to build something downtown, how many houses can we, or units can we put aside for individuals for affordability? And this is not just a Cuyahoga County problem, it's a national problem. So I look at this work that was done really ties into things that I've already been doing. I think it would move the needle a lot faster if we could get the banks on board, because I truly believe as a council member up here, anytime we loan public dollars, we should get something back from it. Now, it might not be monetary dollars, but there are other creative ways that we can help the various communities across Cuyahoga County. So I'm for it, and looking forward to the report, and I just hope that our county exec, Chris Ronayne, wraps his arms around it. It's not about it's about what's right. And he started the housing development piece, so this is another extension to that. So hopefully we can have somebody from the administration next time that will listen to these important reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Simon?
Okay, thank you.
Acknowledge that she is in.
I'm here. Thank you so much to Vice President Stevens, Director O'Toole, everybody who has worked really hard. I went to one of the first couple meetings, and, you know, we suspected this would be the finding, you know, early on. We knew there was a problem. You did, and dove very deeply into the intricacies of every detail possible to help inform us. Knowing what we knew back then is true today. Nothing has been done in terms of sticks, in terms of incentives, in terms of any kind of repercussion. I remember Huntington, the bank came in here, or Key, and said, we're going to do X, Y, Z, and nothing. I sat in this committee, we asked questions, they persuaded us that they were going to be really on board with this, and so council was on board. But you know what? Once bit, twice shy. They did not step up like they said they would. I see no reason we as a county should continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So this is an administrative, at least leadership role, but council needs to make sure that as best that we can hold the bank to the fire and maybe suggest and continue to suggest a different banking partner to help elevate our community. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilman Simon.
It's a very small one.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just on the four banks, is there a rate of return? That's why Key Bank gets it so much, or are they all equal? That's just came to my mind as the discussion was happening, because there has to be some reason for the disparity, and it's not driven by the.
Mr. Chairman, we do not, to my colleague, we're not sure exactly what analysis was made. This evening, we will be voting on, have a piece of legislation, introduced to us on where the administration would like to invest our dollars and have them manage processes for us. As I said earlier, there is a business decision, but there's also a decision about our business as a priority over other folks' business. And so I'm asking each of you to look carefully at what this team brings to you and how we respond to the administration's recommendations for how we invest in which lenders. And I have a meeting scheduled, I believe it's tomorrow morning, with the leadership team from the executive staff to find out why and how they made the decision. I was ill a significant portion of last week, so I was not able to have the meeting last week when we originally tried to have it before this meeting. So their team was delayed because of me, but we are still working on this. For those of you who have watched me over the length of my career, like Councilwoman Conwell, she knows that this is something, the moment, until the very last moment I serve on this council, I will be committed to. So you don't have to worry about me wandering away from this issue. And so we don't know all the answers about the legislation that they've proposed, but we will after staff and I sit down with them tomorrow.
So let's, thank you. And I know we talked about it, but we also want to, the focus of today really is to hear the presentations, and we will deal with the legislative, I'm talking procedural wise, we'll deal with that at a later moment. So I want us to focus on just this. So let me just take a moment and say this. One, I just want to thank each and every member of the CRAS committee, from Mayor Annette Blackwell. I don't want to keep asking everybody's name because I'm going to miss some, but Sally, all of you, all of the great work you've done over this time. You've been faithful and committed, and I just want to commend you and acknowledge all that you've done. I see the mayor standing.
Mr. President, could I ask you to extend a courtesy to me and allow the mayor to come to the microphone and speak from her perspective? We had 3 mayors on the committee, Mayor Blackwell, Mayor Seren, and Mayor Wheelo in alphabetical order.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to also just say thank you to Mayor Stevens. She's not mayor anymore. I keep forgetting. Once a mayor, always a mayor. Vice President Stevens, I met her as mayor, and she was actually my mentor when I became mayor, just for the commitment you made and for choosing me and making sure that mayors were included in this dialogue. It's important to me because in 2016, when I became the mayor of Maple Heights, we were in fiscal emergency. A city written off because of disinvestment. Home values were less than $40,000. No police cars, 5 people in the service department. And this is a corporation. There was no return on the small investment people were trying to make. We have one of the highest property tax delinquencies in the county out of 59. Those are the challenges that leaders that take on these cities have to address, heavy lifting. And I lean on this body, specifically my county council person sitting in front of me, President Jones, for additional dollars to provide the basic services that the people in my city need. Some mayors have to lean harder than others. I'm one of those, and I don't mind asking. The reason I was willing to serve on this committee was because the people in Maple Heights need a champion. You have to have a champion. Who's going to go and fight? Who's going to get their market share? Who's going to make sure there's a return on their investment? That's me. I'm their voice. 25,000 people are not going to come here. I'm listening to the comments, and there are hot issues, but the people that need everyday help, they don't show up here in your citizens' comments, whether it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes. They don't show up. I show up. And I show up because that's what I raised my hand to do, to faithfully, honestly serve them. But I can't do it alone. When we vote for, and Vice President Stevens said it best, when we vote for, people vote for us to represent them, they're expecting that we're going to fight for them, save them in some way. This is a way to do that. What's unique about my experience, I spent years working at KeyBank, many, many years. So I understand banking in a very specific way. Then I spent another 12 years at banking and 16 years in property tax consulting. Understand the portion of that, our sources of revenue. Our local government fund share gets smaller and smaller. And then our 16% of the property tax and the way it's dispersed, the pie, it gets smaller and smaller. Where do we go for help? We use our community development supplemental grant dollars to do exterior home maintenance grant. Last year, we gave 41 grants out, and people did things like roof repair, garage door, fixed steps. And that share was $2,500 because I was not, the people in Maple Heights, not a recipient of the Home Improvement Challenge Fund. What was it? They just wrote the city off. And the state came in and took it over. And so you got 5 years out of fiscal recovery. We did it in 4. We did it in 4 because not the 5, and I'm not taking the credit because I found partners that would say, yes, I will help you. Some of you are sitting up here now. I found partners. There's nothing I won't ask for the people of Maple Heights. And so with that CDSG, we gave 41 grants last year. This year we gave 62. And people are still calling, there's no more money. But then I have the challenge of 2 code enforcement officers going out and writing citations for housing violations, and they end up in my mayor's court. It is a cycle that is just unfair and almost unwinnable. I want to cite them because I need to keep the home property values up, right? And the neighbor across the street doesn't want to see a broken driveway. But a third of the households in my city are headed by single females who work 2.5 jobs. That's what the grant you gave me for the master plan came back. They work 2.5 jobs with 3 children. That is the reality. And all of this data that was presented reflects that in different ways. But underneath the data is what happens when disinvestment takes place. You write cities off. So then we're faced with regionalization choices or the auditor coming in and taking over, reducing our safety forces, not being able to buy equipment, and hoping that between the development grant dollars, and thank God for the ARPA fund money, and people had different ideas about what you did with that, and we fill our documents, and we hope and we pray, and I get my staff ready, we're gonna get this infrastructure dollars. So the work on this committee was important to find out, was there something I was missing? Was there some rock I hadn't looked under for just a few more dollars? Another way to help our residents maintain their home, stay in their home, fix the street, buy equipment. This is a big decision. I want to say in close, this is not just about real estate. Please know that. It's about a quality of life. It's about closing the wealth gap. We throw the word around institutional racism all the time, which ends up in significant levels of poverty, Black infant mortality, Black maternal mortality. That's what these numbers reflect. Please know it's not just about real estate. We need to close this wealth gap so the opportunities for all Americans are present right here in this county, irrespective of zip code. That's why I drove down, even today, I'm supposed to have my feet elevated on ice, and boy, this meeting took a long time, so they're really swollen right now. But I'm gonna ice them up and put them up when I get back. Because this is what leaders do when you serve a city like Maple Heights. You fight. Look beyond the numbers and look at the human story behind it. It is pretty sad. It's pretty sad. And I hope that you will help me fight for the people that live in cities like Maple Heights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. I'm going to take a moment. This was important. Our time is spent, but I needed to make sure that this was also heard. So I just want to take a moment and again personally thank Council Vice President Cheryl Stevens for the work she has done. She has faithfully held this together and led us for the last 4 years.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
And to your comment about continued leadership after Cheryl, this will continue. This has been a personal mission for me. We know if it was not for Mayor Michael White back in the 90s, when we were redlined as a business.
Yes.
It was Mayor White who literally said to the banks, if you do not lend to the businesses and the residents in this community, then we will not deposit with you. And they led to give us an opportunity to have a beautiful building with pretty green grass outside to serve the community. So it should not just be one facility or operation, it should be transformative. So all of those across the east side of Cleveland and East Cleveland and all the communities, that is what should happen. These monies, and I appreciate Frank Ford and his presentations, because this is not an ask. This is this is what should be done. When you deposit money, money is like blood in the body. Blood was meant to circulate. If I deposit my money and I don't get it lent back to me, then it's not circulating, it's bleeding. Your money is leaving out and it's not coming back to you. And all the pain and hurt that Mayor Blackwell described, that it's not simply real estate. All of these things happen. You bleed and your body becomes numb. It hurts, there's pain, and then there's death. And that is what we've experienced in our communities that go beyond just real estate. So for this mission, it will continue. It was there from the day I got here when I said I want to try to replicate what Mayor White did. And it took banking contract after banking contract, but we will continue to do that work. And when I'm not here, it will still continue on with so many others. So we will, and there are other tools that we have not yet talked about, but the work that you've done is going to pay dividends, and we will see the fruit of your work in the months and years to come. So again, I thank you all. So with that, we're going to end there, and we're going to move on to our executive session. All meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio Open Meetings laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside of the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining matters. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not specifically needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent Committee Room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session is ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining matters?
So moved. Second.
Will the clerk call the roll on the motion to go into executive session?
Ms. Conwell? Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Yes. Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron? Council President Jones? The motion carries.
All right, we're. Okay. Council, we don't have a lot of time. It's going to be abbreviated, and we're going to get.
Thank you.
Okay.
These tiny braids, because your other ones were bigger.
We are reconvening the council meeting, and we are now back on the record. Is there any miscellaneous business? If not, this meeting is adjourned, and we will reconvene the council meeting at 5:15.